Welcome to another live stream, my friends. Well, guys, unfortunately, the lower time frame analysis in yesterday's stream aged like a fine glass of milk in a hot car, but this doesn't necessarily mean all hope is lost for the Bulls quite yet. A lot of what I outlined for the midterm yesterday is still very much valid with or without last night's little dumpy dump. Don't get me wrong, I have my concerns moving forward, but that's exactly why I will be keeping my risk management tight. The 4-hour Bitcoin chart honestly gives me mixed feelings right now. I would personally say the midterm trend really hasn't changed all that much yet. We did end up losing our more immediate support. So, I mean, I don't want to take that all too lightly either, but it is what it is. So let's hop into some charts for a quick little update here. Like I said, we did end up losing the immediate support. I'm kind of disappointed about that. I would have loved to see some real good strength from the Bulls by ending up holding this support that we had here, just because, as I've been mentioning, we had that higher high, confirmed higher low on the trend. But of course, trends end up breaking eventually, right? And this is one of those times where we did break the immediate term. On the 4-hour, we still technically have a little bit of support. I played a little bit of a bounce play there. We'll see if it ends up turning into anything. Either way, I ended up locking in a quarter of my profits earlier today, and the remaining 3/4 is just a break-even stop as per usual. Gonna have to zoom in a second, see if it ended up tagging me there. But so far, not looking too bad. Like I said, on the 4-hour, we do still have this upward trending diagonal support line here. It has been respected very well since we got a couple exact touch points here, and this whole little cluster here was hovering right around that support. And we very much so came down and tested that absolutely perfectly on our dump last night. Testing it basically perfectly. With that little bit of a reaction, I ended up taking a bit of a long. Like I said, I already ended up taking a quarter profits because basically I don't trust this price action right now. I think emotions are going to be very high based on what happened last night. And, it's tough to say what's going to happen from here. So I just want to make sure that I protect myself. Full disclosure, I did take a loss, right? I was mentioning that. I did have a fib pulled something like this. I was laddering into another long position there in my support fibs. And as I mentioned in my Telegram, we did end up actually here. Let me just bring that up for you. But basically, we did end up dropping, I think it was 93K. Let me just get my post up here for you. For some reason, it has closed on me. But right here. Basically, I had mentioned last night to followers in my Telegram channel, you guys, that if we drop 93K, I'll be locking in the rest of my long position from lower to offset the loss I may experience from the newer position that I've been laddering into here. So yeah, unfortunately, my lower time frame analysis was incorrect, took that little bit of a loss, but I protected myself by taking profits on my older position. Unfortunately, missed that short, as I mentioned here. So not only just sharing my positions and my entries and that sort of thing, but just also trying to keep a level head, right? Not going to lie, it hurts to miss such a violent move like this, but I just can't bring myself to short something, to FOMO into a short with something that's just kind of straight shot down. Unfortunately, missed the setup, but I also don't want to get completely wrecked. And that's something that's also important in the game of trading, you guys, is know when you've missed a position, because I know at that point there was probably a lot of people FOMOing into shorts, thinking that we're just going to keep going in one direction, but so often we end up seeing those bounces, right? So as mentioned, basically seeing a few nice things, the fact that we ended up getting a little bounce there and so on, just kind of keeping my VIPs up to date, just to try and keep a level head more than anything when the market starts to go nuts like that. So guys, if that is something that interests you, you want to see way more examples, how I'm looking at the market, some of my trade setups, strategies, and so on, for not only entries, but like I said, also how I'm managing my risk and that sort of thing. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the description down below. And that'll basically get you signed up under BloFin, my personal no KYC exchange of choice, to gain access to my free Telegram channel, as well as they are currently running this promo that they are offering to my followers, new and existing, into the group, This promo will be running until January 25th. So if the bonuses as well as access to my private Telegram interests you, scan the QR code on the screen. But yeah, guys, like I said, I don't want to make it too light out of losing this micro trend here, because I mean, the fact is, when we end up losing a bit of a trend like that, we could end up going and retesting the entire channel, right? Which, if that is the case, it's very possible that we see a much bigger move to the downside, in which case we could still be targeting that fib that we never did test down here. Actually, it's changed, obviously, since we set a new high, but that support basically starts around 84.3K. I don't know if we're going to end up dropping to those levels. It's just important to note all possibilities, basically, right? Be ready for anything and be ready to protect yourself as if anything can happen. But so far, what I would be looking for is, like I said, right now, still holding this diagonal support with this yellow trend line here, getting very flirty with it. And if one thing that would concern me a little bit is that since we have so many exact touch points along this trend line, especially now with this new confirmed one on that dump there, if we end up dropping this support and flipping it into resistance, that would be something to watch for, that we could get a further move to the downside. And from there, we have another diagonal trend line, obviously from the initial ascending triangle that I was pointing out. So that's another thing to pay attention to, that if we get a third touch point on that trend line and then end up losing it, I would not be too shocked to see that support flip into resistance, in which case I do think at that point that we would be targeting closer to the bottom of this bigger range on the 4-hour chart. And at that point, we'll have to see what the weekly is doing, because that starts getting into some fairly scary territory that we could be carrying on a much, much larger downtrend, like in the previous market cycle, right? But as I mentioned, there was a few things I mentioned in yesterday's stream that are still very much valid. And one thing that I said is, I would have loved to see this weekly candle to close above my white line here. That's one thing that I was saying to watch for. It was a couple hours in advance, so I was just saying to watch for that. If we would have ended up closing our weekly candle above this white line, I think it would have been very reasonable to expect us to end up retesting this old resistance as support before carrying on to the upside. The fact that we ended up closing below that resistance, so even though our RSI is showing that we do have some hidden strength there, just the fact that we closed below this resistance line here in general makes me just feel that we were vulnerable to more excessive volatility, basically. Because I was mentioning that it's very possible early in this weekly candle that we end up retracing a good chunk of our previous candle. Like I said, had we stayed above these wicks here, above my white line, I think the pullback would have been very controlled and very, very minor, if anything. But the fact that we did close below it just opens us up to the fact that we could retest the whole candle, right? So if we end up coming all the way back down to the bottom, that's around 90K. So I don't want to say all hope is lost for the bulls. It's very natural on any time frame chart, you guys. It's very, very normal to end up retracing and retesting the previous candle. If you were on a 1 minute or a 5 minute chart, nobody would think anything of this. Obviously, on the weekly, it's a much bigger move, but that structure is still the same, right? It's very natural to end up retracing into that previous candle. So until we actually engulf it, I'm not all too worried. If we end up setting a big engulfing bearish candle dropping below this green box and that sort of thing, then yes, I will have serious concerns, and that will be showing some serious strength from the bears, in my opinion. So gonna have to keep an eye on that. But so far, like I said, not all hope is lost quite yet. Let's look at the shorter time frames here. Let's just check this. So I do have a position. That one did get stopped at break even. Apparently, I had another order. Okay, I have a few orders set, I guess, going for the STUBER fib. Must have set it last night or something. But either way, I'm not all too concerned quite yet. I am going to ladder into, like I said, just ended up I guess, triggering another order at the 786 here, but I will absolutely be looking to, if we drop a little bit lower, to ladder into something based on this fib setup here, just for the lower time frame. But just to keep, like I said, things are a little bit risky right now, so I want to keep my risk management tight. So when I am entering positions like this, I still think it's valid because we are testing into our support levels here. However, I'm going to keep my heavier entries, my 60% of my entry in my swing fail territory. So I only entered with about 20% of my position. Let me just double check what my new entry was here. Sorry, just let me load my BloFin here. Okay, 188. Oh, 188, 92, 188. So just front running the 786 a little bit. I have another 20% of my order sitting at about 92,033. I have another 30% of my position at about 91,866. And what was my last 30% was sitting at 91,633 is my other entry. So have a few entries on the way down, but I am going to keep this position a little bit smaller. And like I said, just having my heavier entries closer to the bottom, because I really want to pull my average entry down on this, because it's, like I said, emotions are high. Things are quite volatile. I would not be too surprised to see this support end up breaking. But so far, support is support until it's broken. So we're just going to have to see what happens there. Oh, ended up moving that by accident. Whatever it is, what it is. Guys, this is one thing that I mentioned last night in the Telegram channel. Someone had actually requested that I look at the long short ratio. And I even mentioned this looking back, obviously Captain Hindsight, he's a bit of a jerk sometimes, but I should have taken this warning a little more serious, that I was warning that one thing that was concerning me with the lower timeframes on Bitcoin was the fact that we were starting to see longs building into, basically, as we were trading to the upside, we started to see those longs start to build once again. And basically, generally speaking, when retail is trying to excessively build long positions in the market, that's where we have liquidity or just fuel for the fire to push us to the downside. I really should have taken that a little more serious, but unfortunately can't catch them all. I'm human. I make mistakes as well. It is what it is. But I would, before we end up getting some sort of a serious rally, I would expect shorts to start building again. So if retail is going to be very heavily trying to long this dip that we're seeing right now, then I expect the price to just keep pushing to the downside, basically. So that's something we're going to have to watch there. Looking at Ethereum, interesting. We are currently basically testing support here. I don't like that we actually had a candle body closing below this. I would have really liked to see just wicks below this and closing green candle bodies above this. It is nice to see that we're trying to reclaim this resistance, or sorry, this support rather. And if I pull up a fib, chances are we never did break the 115. We did very slightly. I still think it's possible that Ethereum sees a bit of a bounce here just because we have reclaimed that, but I think it would be quite risky. I myself am not taking an additional long position on that. I think it's risky enough to be taking a Bitcoin long at this point. I think the market is dangerous right now. So again, keeping risk management in mind. But yeah, I'd rather only enter a position on one at this point here. So let me just check the chat. Let me know how you guys are doing. Hopefully some of you guys caught that short. I sure didn't. That's a position that I missed, and it hurts me because you guys know that I love being a bear. I love trading the downside, and unfortunately I missed that move yesterday, but that's totally fine. That's a part of trading. You can't catch them all. It is what it is. But hopefully some of you guys did manage to catch that. If you did, congratulations, because that thing the floor absolutely dropped. It just, I mean, how long did that even take? Maybe an hour or two? That little flush that we got there? Yeah, basically a 2-hour move. And what kind of a percentage are we looking at? For Bitcoin, well, only just under 4%. I mean, that's actually a pretty big move with Bitcoin these days. when I first started trading Bitcoin. I mean, it would fluctuate 30 or 40% a day. So it still seems low. But that being said, for an asset like Bitcoin, that is pretty impressive to move 4% in a matter of a couple of hours. So let me catch up on the chat. How are you all doing? I will just check a couple altcoins here. Or silver and gold. I will look at silver and gold 1 second. Is the downturn happening with more retail longs? I mean, it's hard to say how it's going to continue moving, but yeah, obviously, so far when retail did start trying to long that long into resistance there, basically, and I guess I would fit into that category in this case, right? So, yeah, as retail building longs into resistance, although it was above resistance, but retail building longs, and that gives the fuel for the fire. Just like if retail starts shorting heavily, that would be rocket fuel, right? That would be liquidity to push us to the upside. So we're going to have to see what happens there. I will take a look at gold and silver quick for you. Oh boy. So did gold basically do the opposite? That's kind of what it looks like to me. Gold actually looking fantastic into all-time highs once again. Not too surprised to see that because this thing has been on an absolute mission. You can see on the 4 hour, we technically dropped below our higher low that we had because we just, I mean, it's micro analyzing, but we had our high, we had our higher high, confirmed higher low. We did drop it, but it was just a wick and we reclaimed it. So that's, although it would have went past the 115 on such a small range like that, it still did end up holding that support. So at this point, currently we have that high, this higher high. This is our confirmed higher low at this point. So let me just map that out here. Something like this. So at this point, I wouldn't be too surprised to see a pullback at some point, but if it does, we just have beautiful structure facing to the upside so far, right? Just like Bitcoin. I mean, this can change at any time. We could absolutely nuke right through this white line here, and then the trend is broken once again. But so far, I would expect a range something like this just because of how the structure currently has formed there. Let me take a look at silver as well. I assume it looks very similar. Yeah, quite similar, actually slightly different. A much tighter, more micro-analyzed structure in this case. But just looking at it for what it is, and once again, this could change at any time. And I personally don't even trade gold or silver, so I don't know how often this structure does kind of flip-flop like this. But just looking at the structure for what it is from basic TA, I would say here's our high. We did set a slightly higher high, confirming this as our higher low. And then we actually set another higher high, which means this was our low, right? So if I set line something like that, then basically I don't want to see the bulls lose that level. Of course, if they do, we could start looking for some sort of a retest, something like that. But I still wouldn't think that the trend is necessarily over just because gold and silver have both been in such a crazy trend. And I don't really want to stand in front of a train like that. However, just looking at the structure for what it is, we are still staircasing higher technically. We do have this little gap down here. Maybe it is possible that we end up coming down, filling that gap before carrying on higher, something like that. But overall, I would say the trend is still very nice there. Is downturn. What is your batting or winning ratio? Like my personal winning rate is I hit about 74. Last I checked anyways, I was hitting about 74% of my trades were winners. But of course, it all depends what like how big your winners are compared to your losers and stuff as well. So having a high hit rate doesn't necessarily mean good trading. I mean, not saying that about myself, but I'm just saying in general, some people will say, oh, I win 80% of my trades or 90% of my trades. But if your losses are significantly bigger than your wins, that's where you're still going to run into troubles, right? And that's why I love Fibonacci so much, is because I look for those pullbacks and I try to control those losses when they happen, right? Because as I said earlier, with trading, it's not just about winning every trade. It's also about controlling your losses and recovering from those losses, obviously. How do I see RSI in retail longs? I don't... Not sure what you mean there. There's no RSI on the long short indicator. Oh, we are getting a nice little bounce off that 786. I accidentally changed that. I might cancel my lower orders. I might have to cancel my lower orders. I wasn't really expecting it to take off that quickly. Yeah, for now, I am going to remove my other laddered orders here. But I am going to set an alert on my average entry here. Just as a little reminder to check the price, because even if I get, I'm going to update my stop loss to break even here as well, just because, like I said, I really want to keep my risk management tight right now because I just don't trust the price action that's happening. That goes for either direction. I just always want to treat the start of my positions in conditions like this as a scalp, basically protect myself quickly. And if it turns into a runner, fantastic. Okay, there we go. So yeah, basically if the rest of this, well, if this position gets stopped at break even, there's a good chance I'm just going to re-enter, depending if we end up just smashing through the support line or how we end up reacting with it. If we just kind of test it and we start finding support, I am likely just going to take it again. But so far, we'll see what happens with this one. And guys, one last thing I want to end on here is one reason why I still don't want to rule the bulls out and why I still do have a little bit of FOMO for the long side from these support levels right now is I was mentioning in the Telegram as well that basically when we got this dump, right, I was just saying how aggressive that was for a 2-hour dump. Notice that this is the only little bit of consolidation we had until we found our bottom. There is basically no sideways consolidation, price action, no building support, nothing like that on the way down. It was a straight nuke to the downside. So right now, if we can end up breaking out of this channel and actually breaking out of these highs, there's really nothing in this whole pocket here that should really give Bitcoin all too much trouble. The fact that we never built any support on our dump to the downside means that there really isn't much for resistance on our upside move as long as we can break out of this range, basically. So again, I think if we can end up clearing out of this, I think it's quite likely that we just end up seeing the opposite move to the upside. We see that so often when we get those sharp moves in the market. That goes whether it's to the downside or the upside. Very often we see the exact opposite move happen a short while later. So that's another reason why, especially that we've started finding support. That's another reason why I'm very interested in playing the long side right now rather than FOMOing into a short after we already got a massive move to the downside, right? So still not going full moon boy, not going completely blind to the possibility we trade lower. Like I said, that's why I'm updating stop losses quick and that sort of thing on the positions that I am taking right now. So, anyways, guys, I think that's about all I wanted to go over today. Just a real quick market update because I know emotions are high. I know there's a lot of panic in the market with what happened last night. But realistically, guys, like I said, on the weekly, on the 4-hour, not a lot has actually changed for me. Yeah, there's a bit. The only thing that really changed for me on the 4-hour is that we did lose that micro trend. But as far as the overall trend, I still don't think Bitcoin looks all too bad. Just obviously, that doesn't mean you can just FOMO long into any position whenever you want. Obviously, you still want to get into actual support levels, much like these fibs that I have mapped out. Looking for those pullbacks when you have structure breaks, that's still very important. I still always prefer to get into retracement positions rather than breakouts, because breakouts so often end up reversing eventually. So, or just getting fake outs and that sort of thing. So with that, guys, like I said, I think that's about all I wanted to go over. So if you appreciate these live streams, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And if I didn't get to checking all the chart requests or something like that, I will throw some up in the Telegram when I get a sec here shortly after wrapping up the stream, if there is any. And just a reminder for those of you interested in learning and seeing more examples of some of my favorite trade strategies, how I use Fibonacci's and market structure, give more of my thoughts on the market in general, do yourselves a favor and get in my Telegram by scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the description down below. And as mentioned, my partners at BloFin are currently still running this promo for my followers until January 5th. So if that's something that interests you, get in there as well. With that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Thank you so much for watching once again.